He thought he was throwing one unforgettable celebration. But before the night was over, everyone inside the ballroom would discover that the easiest person to dismiss was the one they understood the least. The Grand Hawthorne Hotel in downtown Chicago shimmered beneath warm crystal chandeliers as hundreds of guests gathered to celebrate the engagement of Marcus Hayes and his beautiful fiancée, Claire Bennett. Expensive suits, elegant gowns, polished marble floors, and soft piano music blended into an evening designed to impress every influential family in attendance. Waiters moved gracefully between conversations carrying silver trays filled with sparkling drinks, while photographers captured smiling faces that seemed untouched by hardship. Marcus stood confidently near the center of the ballroom, shaking hands with business partners and longtime friends, believing everything in his carefully planned future was finally falling into place. Then the large entrance doors quietly opened. A woman stepped inside wearing a simple navy blue dress that looked clean but modest compared to the designer clothing surrounding her. She carried a neatly wrapped silver gift box in one hand and a cream-colored envelope in the other. Her shoes showed signs of long use, yet she walked with calm confidence instead of embarrassment. Her name was Ava Brooks. Several conversations immediately slowed as curious eyes followed her across the polished floor. Some guests whispered behind raised glasses, trying to remember where they had seen her before. Others noticed that she seemed completely out of place among the city's wealthiest families. Claire looked toward Marcus with confusion. "Do you know her?" she asked quietly. Marcus turned toward the entrance, and the color slowly disappeared from his face. He recognized Ava immediately. Years earlier, she had been the woman who believed in him before he had money, before success had changed the direction of his life, and before he convinced himself that ambition mattered more than loyalty. He never expected to see her again, especially not tonight. Ava continued walking slowly toward the couple, protecting the small gift box with surprising care. There was no anger in her expression, no bitterness in her eyes, only quiet determination that suggested she had come for one reason alone. Before she could speak, several guests began exchanging amused smiles. One woman softly laughed and muttered that someone must have invited the wrong person. Another guessed she was looking for charity instead of a celebration. Their assumptions spread through the ballroom faster than the music drifting from the piano. Marcus felt every pair of eyes waiting for his reaction. Fear mixed with pride, and instead of choosing kindness, he chose the easier path. He forced a polite smile toward his guests before looking directly at hotel security. His voice was calm enough for everyone nearby to hear. "She is not welcome here," he said. "Kick her out." The music continued playing, but the atmosphere changed instantly. Every nearby conversation stopped. Ava stood completely still for a brief moment, lowering her eyes toward the gift she had carried across the city without saying a single word in her own defense. The security staff approached respectfully, expecting resistance that never came. Ava simply nodded, thanked them for their professionalism, and quietly turned toward the entrance without asking Marcus a single question. She did not plead. She did not argue. She did not reveal why she had come. She only tightened her grip on the small gift box and the sealed envelope as though breaking a promise would hurt far more than public humiliation ever could. Just as the hotel doors closed behind her, the headlights of 3 black luxury sport utility vehicles slowly illuminated the rain-soaked entrance outside, and every member of the valet staff suddenly straightened their posture as though someone extraordinarily important had just arrived. Ava stepped beneath the hotel canopy as the evening rain quietly tapped against the polished stone walkway. One of the security officers who had escorted her outside stopped beside her with an apologetic expression. "I am sorry," he said sincerely. "I was only following instructions." Ava answered with a gentle smile that carried neither anger nor humiliation. "You treated me with respect," she replied. "You have nothing to apologize for." She carefully adjusted her grip on the silver gift box before looking down at the cream-colored envelope resting against it. The edges had become slightly worn after years of careful protection, yet she held it with the same care as if it had been written that very morning. Inside the ballroom, the music resumed, but the conversations had shifted. Several guests laughed quietly as though the interruption had merely become another amusing story to share over dinner. Marcus accepted another congratulatory handshake, pretending nothing unusual had happened, but every few seconds his thoughts drifted back toward the entrance. Claire noticed the distraction immediately. "Who was she?" she asked softly. Marcus forced a casual smile. "Someone from a long time ago," he answered. "It does not matter anymore." Claire nodded, accepting the explanation, although something about his expression suggested the past was not nearly as distant as he wanted everyone to believe. Outside, Ava remained standing beneath the covered entrance instead of walking away. She glanced toward the rain-covered streets of downtown Chicago and quietly whispered to herself, "I made a promise, and I will keep it." Years earlier, Marcus's mother had placed both the small gift and the sealed letter into Ava's hands with one simple request. "When the time is right," she had said, "make sure my son receives these." Ava had honored that promise through every change in her own life. She had never mailed the letter. She had never asked someone else to deliver it. She believed some promises deserved to be fulfilled face to face, no matter how difficult the moment became. The security officer stepped back inside the hotel, leaving Ava alone beneath the entrance lights. At that exact moment, 3 black luxury sport utility vehicles rolled to a smooth stop in front of the valet station. Every valet attendant immediately straightened their jackets. The hotel manager hurried across the lobby after receiving a brief but urgent phone call through his headset. His expression changed completely as he looked toward the arriving vehicles. "Everyone, please be ready," he quietly instructed the staff. "Our honored guest has arrived." None of the ballroom guests noticed the growing activity outside, but the hotel employees certainly did. The valet captain personally opened the first vehicle's door, while several members of the concierge team quietly assembled near the entrance. Ava remained unaware that the arrival had anything to do with her. She simply continued protecting the small gift and the sealed envelope, believing that if she needed to wait a little longer to keep her promise, then waiting would be a small price to pay. The hotel manager quickly scanned the entrance before his eyes suddenly settled on Ava. His expression shifted from professional concentration to unmistakable surprise, as though he had just recognized someone he had never expected to find standing alone in the rain. Without another word, he immediately walked toward her. While inside the ballroom, Marcus raised a champagne glass to thank his guests, completely unaware that the quietest woman he had tried to erase from the evening was about to become the most important person in the entire hotel. Ava looked up as the hotel manager approached with unexpected urgency, his polished shoes splashing lightly through the rain that had begun collecting along the curb. When he stopped in front of her, his expression carried none of the uncertainty he had shown only moments earlier inside the ballroom. Instead, he respectfully lowered his head before speaking. "Mrs. Romano," he said with quiet professionalism, "please accept my sincerest apologies for what has just happened. We were not aware you had already arrived." Ava looked slightly surprised by his greeting, but answered with the same gentle composure she had shown throughout the evening. "Thank you," she replied softly. "There is no need to apologize for something you did not personally do." Before the manager could respond, the rear door of the center sport utility vehicle opened. A tall man stepped onto the rain-darkened pavement wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit beneath a long black overcoat. His calm expression carried quiet authority rather than intimidation, and every employee standing beneath the hotel entrance instinctively straightened their posture. This was Vincent Romano, a man whose reputation was recognized long before his face entered a room. Yet instead of looking toward the hotel entrance or acknowledging the staff waiting to greet him, his eyes searched only for one person. The moment he saw Ava standing beneath the canopy, the reserved expression on his face softened into genuine warmth. He walked directly toward her with an unhurried confidence that drew the attention of every valet and concierge nearby. "I am sorry I kept you waiting," Vincent said, stopping beside her. "Traffic slowed us down more than I expected." Ava smiled reassuringly. "You arrived exactly when you needed to," she answered. Vincent's eyes immediately noticed the silver gift box and the cream-colored envelope she still held carefully against her chest. He also noticed the faint trace of sadness she had tried to hide behind her calm smile. "Did everything go as you hoped?" he asked quietly. Ava hesitated for only a moment before answering honestly. "Not exactly," she admitted, "but I still intend to keep my promise." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. He did not ask another question because he already understood enough from the look in her eyes. Turning toward the hotel manager, he asked in a calm voice, Would you kindly tell me what happened before we arrived? The manager briefly explained that a guest had instructed security to escort Ava outside after claiming she was not welcome at the private celebration. His words were careful and respectful, yet every sentence carried visible regret. Vincent listened without interrupting. When the explanation ended, he remained silent for several seconds before looking back at Ava. "Do you still wish to go inside?" he asked. Ava glanced at the small gift box before quietly nodding. "I came here to fulfill a promise," she replied. "I would like to finish what I started." Vincent offered his arm without hesitation. "Then we will finish it together." The hotel manager immediately stepped aside and motioned for the entrance doors to be opened once again. Inside the ballroom, Marcus had just finished thanking his guests for joining the celebration when the music unexpectedly softened. Heads slowly turned toward the entrance as the large doors opened for a second time that evening. And the first person everyone recognized was the same woman they had watched leave only minutes before. This time, however, she was not walking alone. Every conversation inside the ballroom faded into uneasy silence as Ava walked through the entrance with quiet confidence, her hand resting lightly on Vincent Romano's arm. The same guests who had watched her leave only minutes earlier now stared in disbelief, trying to understand why every hotel employee suddenly stood with the utmost respect as the couple passed. The hotel manager personally held the ballroom doors open while the concierge staff stepped aside without being asked. Marcus felt an unfamiliar weight settle across his chest. He recognized the man beside Ava immediately. Vincent Romano was known throughout Chicago as a businessman whose influence reached far beyond the boardrooms where he was most often seen. Yet the man Marcus expected to project intimidation carried himself with remarkable calm. Vincent acknowledged no one else in the room because his attention remained entirely on the woman beside him. He quietly asked, "Are you certain you still wish to do this?" Ava looked down at the silver gift box before meeting his eyes with a peaceful smile. "I have waited too many years to break a promise now," she answered. Vincent nodded once. "Then I will stand beside you until you are finished." Their measured conversation somehow carried more authority than raised voices ever could. Claire instinctively stepped closer to Marcus. "Who is he?" she whispered. Marcus struggled to answer because the truth sounded impossible even inside his own mind. Before he could speak, the hotel manager approached Vincent with visible respect. "Welcome, Mr. Romano," he said. "Please accept our sincerest apologies for what occurred before your arrival. We take full responsibility." Vincent responded politely. "Thank you. I appreciate your professionalism." He then looked toward Marcus without anger or hostility. There was only quiet composure in his expression. Marcus forced himself to step forward. I did not realize," he began, but the words disappeared before he could finish them. Vincent did not interrupt. Instead, he turned slightly toward Ava and asked one simple question. "Would you like me to introduce you, or would you prefer to do that yourself?" Ava answered softly, "You may." Vincent gently reached for her hand, not as a display of power, but as a gesture of unwavering support. He looked toward the room and spoke with calm clarity. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Mrs. Ava Romano." The words settled over the ballroom like complete silence. Several guests exchanged stunned glances. Claire's eyes widened as she slowly looked from Ava to Marcus, suddenly realizing why he had reacted so strongly when Ava first entered. Marcus himself stood frozen, unable to reconcile the memory of the woman he had once dismissed with the confident woman now standing beside one of the most respected men in the city. Yet the greatest surprise was not her marriage. It was the way Vincent looked at her. His respect was unmistakable, built not on appearances or status, but on genuine admiration. Ava did not look around the room seeking satisfaction from anyone's shock. She remained exactly as she had been when she first arrived, holding the carefully wrapped gift and the sealed envelope with quiet determination. The reason she had returned had never changed. She had not come to prove anyone wrong. She had come to keep a promise. Looking directly at Marcus, she spoke for the first time since re-entering the ballroom. "May I have just a few minutes of your time?" she asked. "After that, I will leave, and I will never trouble you again." Ava looked at Marcus with the same quiet composure she had carried since the moment she first entered the ballroom. There was no resentment in her eyes, only the calm determination of someone who had traveled a long road to finish one final responsibility. Marcus slowly nodded, unable to find the confidence he had displayed earlier that evening. "You have all the time you need," he said softly. Ava turned toward Vincent. "May I do this myself?" she asked. Vincent smiled with gentle reassurance. "Of course. I will be right here." Ava stepped forward and carefully placed the small silver gift box into Marcus's hands. "This belongs to you," she said. "It always did." Marcus stared at the neatly wrapped package before looking back at her with confusion. "What is it?" he asked. Ava answered quietly. "Open it." The ballroom remained completely silent as Marcus slowly lifted the lid. Resting inside on dark velvet was an antique silver pocket watch. The moment he saw it, his breathing caught. His hands began to tremble almost immediately because he recognized it without hesitation. It had belonged to his grandfather before being passed down to his mother as the family's most treasured keepsake. Years earlier, after his mother became seriously ill, the watch had disappeared. Marcus had searched every drawer in the house and believed it had been lost forever. He carefully lifted it from the box, turning it over until he saw the tiny engraving on the back. It was exactly the same watch he remembered holding as a child while his grandfather patiently taught him how to tell time. Marcus looked up at Ava, unable to understand. "How did you?" he whispered. Ava gently raised the cream-colored envelope she had protected throughout the evening. "Your mother asked me to keep both of these safe," she explained. "Before she passed away, she told me there would come a day when you would need them more than you realized. She asked me to place them directly into your hands when the right moment arrived." She extended the envelope toward him. "This letter is from her." Marcus accepted it with shaking hands. The familiar handwriting across the front instantly brought tears to his eyes. For several long seconds, he simply stared at his mother's name without opening it. The room remained so quiet that even the soft ticking of the antique watch seemed almost audible. Finally, Marcus unfolded the letter and began reading. Every line carried his mother's warmth, wisdom, and unconditional love. She wrote about kindness, gratitude, and the importance of judging people by their character rather than their circumstances. She thanked Ava for standing beside her through the hardest months of her illness, for driving her to medical appointments, for preparing meals when she no longer had the strength to cook, and for bringing laughter into a home filled with uncertainty. Near the end of the letter, one sentence caused Marcus to stop reading altogether. "If life ever convinces you to walk away from people who truly love you, remember that success without kindness is only another form of failure." Marcus lowered the letter as tears quietly filled his eyes. Memories he had buried beneath years of ambition returned all at once. He remembered Ava sitting beside his mother's hospital bed, reading aloud for hours without ever expecting recognition. He remembered every sacrifice she had made while asking for nothing in return. Around the ballroom, guests slowly lowered their eyes, realizing that the woman they had dismissed only minutes earlier had not arrived seeking attention or revenge. She had come carrying the final wish of a mother who had trusted her with something more valuable than money, reputation, or status. A heavy silence settled over the ballroom as Marcus continued holding his mother's letter with trembling hands. The words on the page no longer felt like memories from the past. They felt like a mirror reflecting every decision he wished he could undo. He slowly folded the letter with the same care his mother had once shown while writing it, then looked toward Ava. For the first time that evening, he saw not the woman he believed he had left behind, but the woman who had quietly honored a promise after everyone else had forgotten it. "I do not deserve what you have done for me," Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "After the way I treated you tonight, you still chose to bring me the most valuable things my family ever owned." Ava answered without hesitation. "I did not come because of what you did," she said gently. "I came because of what I promised your mother. She deserved to have her final wish respected." Her calm words carried no accusation, making them even more powerful. The hotel manager stepped forward with visible regret. "Mrs. Romano," he said respectfully, "I owe you a sincere apology on behalf of our entire staff. You should never have been escorted outside. We failed to treat every guest with the dignity they deserve." Ava smiled politely. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. The security officers were respectful. They simply followed the instructions they were given. The manager lowered his head even further. "That does not excuse what happened." Before anyone else could speak, Vincent looked calmly toward the manager. His expression remained composed, free of anger or hostility. "May I ask you one question?" he said. "Of course, Mr. Romano," the manager answered immediately. Vincent glanced around the ballroom before speaking in a steady voice that everyone could hear. "If my wife had arrived wearing an expensive designer gown and several pieces of jewelry instead of a simple dress, would anyone have asked her to leave before learning who she was?" No one answered. The silence that followed felt far louder than any argument. Several guests slowly lowered their eyes, recognizing that the answer was painfully obvious. Vincent continued in the same calm tone. "Respect should never depend on someone's appearance, reputation, or financial status. It should be the starting point, not the reward." His words settled deeply throughout the ballroom because they were impossible to challenge. Claire quietly stepped away from Marcus and looked toward Ava with genuine regret. The laughter she had shared with the other guests earlier now felt deeply embarrassing. Around the room, conversations disappeared completely as people reflected on how quickly they had judged someone they had never taken the time to know. Marcus looked once more at the antique pocket watch resting in his palm before carefully placing it beside his mother's letter. He finally understood that the greatest gift Ava had returned was not an heirloom or a handwritten message. It was the opportunity to become the man his mother had always believed he could be. The elegant ballroom, once filled with pride and celebration, had quietly transformed into something entirely different. It had become a place where appearances had lost their power, where truth had spoken without raising its voice, and where one woman's unwavering integrity had accomplished what wealth, influence, and status never could. Even the soft music seemed different now, not because the melody had changed, but because every heart listening to it had. No one seemed interested in returning to the celebration anymore. The elegant decorations, the expensive flowers, and the carefully prepared speeches suddenly felt insignificant compared to the lesson unfolding before every pair of eyes in the ballroom. Marcus slowly walked toward Ava, still holding the letter in one hand and the antique pocket watch in the other. Every step seemed heavier than the last, because he finally understood the weight of everything he had lost through his own choices. When he stopped in front of her, he lowered his head without caring who might be watching. "I owe you more than an apology," he said quietly. "I spent years believing success meant leaving my past behind. Tonight, I realized I left behind the people who believed in me when I had nothing. I judged you by the same shallow standards that I once promised myself I would never follow. I am truly sorry." Ava listened patiently before answering. "Your apology matters because it is honest," she replied with gentle sincerity. "But do not spend your life wishing you could change yesterday. Spend it becoming someone your mother would be proud to recognize today." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding that forgiveness was never about erasing mistakes. It was about refusing to let those mistakes define every tomorrow. Claire stepped forward next. Her eyes reflected genuine embarrassment rather than obligation. "Mrs. Romano," she began softly, "I judged you before I knew anything about you. I joined the whispers instead of asking a simple question. I am deeply sorry." Ava offered her the same warm smile she had given everyone else that evening. "Thank you," she answered. "The strongest people are not those who never make mistakes. They are the ones willing to admit them." Claire quietly wiped away a tear before stepping back beside Marcus, seeing him differently than she had only an hour earlier. Vincent remained silent until Marcus looked toward him. "Mr. Romano," Marcus said respectfully, "I understand if you never think highly of me again." Vincent met his eyes with calm composure. "People often believe respect comes from power," he replied. "It does not. Respect comes from character, and character is built one decision at a time. Tonight you cannot change your first decision, but tomorrow belongs entirely to you." His words carried no threat, no anger, and no desire to humiliate. They carried something much heavier. They carried responsibility. An older guest who had quietly observed everything throughout the evening finally spoke from across the ballroom. "I have attended hundreds of celebrations," he said thoughtfully. "I have forgotten almost all of them. I suspect none of us will ever forget this one." Several guests nodded in quiet agreement. The young hotel employee who had first escorted Ava outside approached her with visible hesitation. "Mrs. Romano," he said, "thank you for treating me kindly when you had every reason not to. I hope I never judge another guest before knowing their story." Ava smiled warmly. "Kindness is never wasted," she replied. "Sometimes it simply takes time before people understand its value." Around the ballroom, Conversations resumed one by one, but they sounded different now. There were no more whispers about clothing or appearance. Instead, people spoke quietly about promises, integrity, and the surprising strength of humility. Marcus carefully folded his mother's letter once again and placed it inside his jacket beside the antique pocket watch. For the first time in many years, he realized that the greatest inheritance his family had left him was not wealth or reputation. It was the opportunity to choose compassion before pride, respect before assumption, and gratitude before success. And that lesson had been delivered not by the most powerful man in the room, but by the quiet woman everyone had been too quick to overlook. The atmosphere inside the ballroom had changed so completely that the engagement celebration no longer felt like the reason everyone had gathered. The laughter that had filled the room earlier had been replaced by thoughtful conversations and quiet reflection. Even the soft piano music seemed gentler now, blending into an evening that had become unforgettable for reasons no one had expected. Marcus carefully placed his mother's letter back inside its envelope before looking at Ava once more. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "not only for keeping your promise, but for giving me the chance to hear my mother's voice one last time. I almost lost that forever because of my own pride." Ava gave a small nod. "She loved you very much," she replied. "She never stopped believing that one day you would become the man she always saw in you." Marcus lowered his eyes, understanding that her faith in him had survived far longer than his faith in himself. Claire stepped beside him and quietly slipped her hand into his. She smiled gently at Ava. "You have changed more lives tonight than you probably realize," she said. "I hope we remember this lesson long after the flowers are gone and the music stops." Ava answered with quiet humility. Then tonight was worth the journey. The hotel manager approached once again, this time carrying a neatly sealed envelope. "Mrs. Romano," he said respectfully, "this contains a formal apology from our hotel and a written commitment that we will strengthen our hospitality training so every guest is treated with equal dignity and respect. We cannot erase tonight, but we can make certain we learn from it." Ava accepted the envelope with appreciation before looking toward Vincent. He smiled encouragingly, allowing her to decide what should happen next. After a brief moment, she handed the envelope back to the manager. "Please keep it," she said kindly. "Frame it somewhere your staff can see it every day. Let it remind everyone that respect should never depend on appearance." The manager accepted it with visible gratitude. "We will," he promised. One by one, several guests quietly approached Ava to offer sincere apologies for their assumptions. She accepted every apology with grace, never making anyone feel ashamed beyond what their own conscience had already accomplished. Her kindness became the final lesson of the evening because forgiveness proved far more powerful than humiliation ever could. Vincent gently offered Ava his arm once again. "Are you ready to go home?" he asked softly. Ava looked around the ballroom one last time. The same room that had rejected her only a short while earlier now stood filled with people who viewed her through entirely different eyes. She smiled peacefully. "Yes," she answered. Together they began walking toward the exit. This time, no one whispered. No one looked away. Guests naturally stepped aside, not because they feared the man beside her, but because they deeply respected the woman walking with him. Marcus remained standing where he was, watching them leave while holding his mother's letter close to his heart. He realized that the greatest display of strength he had witnessed all evening had never come from wealth, influence, or reputation. It had come from a woman who had refused to let bitterness replace kindness, and from a husband who understood that protecting another person's dignity was the highest expression of love. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the streets of Chicago shining beneath the city lights as though the night itself had quietly turned the page toward a better tomorrow. Several months passed, yet the memory of that extraordinary evening at the Grand Hawthorne Hotel remained vivid in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. The engagement celebration itself slowly faded into the background of memory, but the lesson born from a simple promise continued to influence lives long after the ballroom lights had been dimmed. Marcus found himself returning to his mother's handwritten letter almost every Sunday morning. He no longer read it searching for comfort alone. He read it searching for guidance. The antique silver pocket watch rested on his office desk instead of inside a safe, reminding him each day that time was measured not by success, but by the kind of person he chose to become. His colleagues gradually noticed the difference. He greeted every employee by name, listened before making decisions, and treated everyone with the same respect regardless of position or appearance. The transformation did not happen overnight, but it was sincere enough that people who had known him for years quietly admitted he had become a different man. Claire witnessed those changes every day. Instead of pretending the difficult evening had never happened, she embraced the opportunity to grow beside him. Together, they began volunteering at a neighborhood community center several weekends each month, honoring the values Marcus's mother had tried to teach throughout her life. At the Grand Hawthorne Hotel, the manager fulfilled every promise he had made. New employee orientation included additional hospitality training centered on dignity, empathy, and equal respect for every guest. The young hotel employee who had politely escorted Ava outside that evening later became one of the hotel's most trusted guest relations supervisors because his compassion consistently reflected the standard the hotel now hoped every employee would follow. Whenever new staff members asked why respect had become such an important part of the hotel's culture, the manager simply smiled and answered that every person carried a story invisible to the eye, and no one should ever be judged before that story was understood. Meanwhile, Vincent and Ava returned to the peaceful rhythm of their everyday lives. They preferred quiet mornings, evening walks along the Chicago River, dinners with close friends, and simple moments shared away from public attention. Although many people admired Vincent's reputation, those who truly knew him understood that his greatest source of pride had never been influence or success. It was the privilege of standing beside a woman whose kindness remained unchanged regardless of how others treated her. Ava continued serving her community exactly as she always had. She volunteered at local charities, visited elderly neighbors who lived alone, and quietly helped families facing difficult seasons without expecting recognition in return. She believed that true dignity revealed itself through ordinary acts of compassion rather than extraordinary moments of attention. From time to time, people who had attended the engagement celebration recognized the couple in restaurants, parks, or charity events. Some introduced themselves again with sincere gratitude. Others simply offered respectful smiles, remembering the unforgettable lesson they had witnessed that rainy evening. Yet almost no one remembered the expensive decorations, elegant clothing, or lavish celebration. They remembered a quiet woman carrying a small silver gift box and a sealed letter, keeping a promise after years of silence. And they remembered the calm husband who stood beside her with unwavering respect instead of pride. In the end, the evening became more than a story about unexpected identities or remarkable influence. It became a reminder that appearances could open a door, but character determined who deserved to walk through it. Long after the music had faded and the flowers had disappeared, one truth continued echoing through every life touched by that remarkable night. Real greatness was never found in wealth, reputation, or power. It was found in the courage to protect another person's dignity before knowing anything about their circumstances. And on that unforgettable evening, an entire ballroom finally remembered what true honor looked like.